Many of us are aware that right now we're facing a leadership crisis. Leadership is in ruins. Corporate culture is in big trouble. HR is suffering in a major way, and structures are breaking down within companies. Frankly, I think it's time that companies have authentic conversations about the situation that we're in right now. Many people are pretending like everything is as per normal and that life can go on as we are. If you look at all talks and conferences and events, they're talking about, systems and processes and a very exciting technology that is coming up and how it's going to change our lives and revolutionize how we do things, which is all entirely true and valid. But here's the problem. We haven't even diagnosed where we are right now. Everybody's trying to predict the future, how new technology will change things, how the game will change, and we're all invested all our energy into the future with fear, with excitement, with trepidation, and that's all perfectly fine. But who is analyzing where we are right now? So I think a lot of people using systems and metrics to measure where we are right now are very much statistical based. So they'll ask surveys and questions and say, what percentage of people are happy? What percentage of people are sad? What processes are working? And it's all very scientific. So we can actually now measure happiness. But how can you measure somebody's happiness? So you ask 10 questions and you say, right, based on these 10 questions, it seems that people are unhappy. What is happiness? What is the role of a leader? What are we doing with our companies? What are we trying to achieve? Because the questions and the answers and the statistics tend to miss out on authentic conversations. And one of the speakers said to me, you know what, Rishad, people don't want to listen to this. They don't want to be told what is going on right now. They want to be sold the usual stuff. So if you find a lot of conferences and a lot of speakers talking about the same things, not ruffling any feathers and rocking the boat. For instance, one of the statistics was saying that there's a 90% attrition rate where CEOs and top leaders are leaving. So then how do we diagnose that problem? So they say in the article, this is the problem and these are the solutions. And it's got these 7 steps that seemed like it was cut and paste from ChatGPT or some kind of process manual. And what we have to recognize right now is the world has changed. So applying these formulas and cut and paste concepts into where we are and where we need to go simply seems as if though we've addressed the underlying problems and that we've come up with a solution. No, as Einstein said, I would spend 90% of my time identifying what the problem is and 10% in order to fix it. But the problem is we're not defining what the problem is and where the situation is because we're in the framework. We're looking at the problem within the framework. Again, quoting Einstein, you can't solve a problem from the same level of awareness that created the problem. So we're constantly shooting in the dark here, coming up with solutions that we think are going to change the situation of unhappiness in the workplace, of people resigning, of people feeling disconnected, of people not wanting to turn up to work anymore. And there's a great sense of dis-ease in the corporate culture right now, and the culture is lacking. But then how do we fix culture? Well, we bring in a team and we roll out a 7-step plan and bringing in audit reports and all these type of things that make everything into statistics. But we're missing the point. We're missing the point that people and culture requires an entire perspective shift. We're looking at this problem the wrong way. So here we go. We start off with the individual. When an individual is experiencing unhappiness, lack of meaning, feeling life is worthless, we apply certain questioning, we ask questions. So if we could diagnose corporate culture and the corporate situation right now as an individual, we would say this individual is not well. Most corporate culture is toxic. Most environments are pretentious. People are coming in with very expensive solutions that pretend to help. And of course, they're doing the best that they can. But the number one thing you've got to do in an individual is find out what's really going on a holistic level. We live in a world right now where we apply a reductionist view of the world. What we're doing is looking for evidence, we're micro-identifying, and we're refusing to see how that particular issue is related to the wider issue. So if we look at a reductionist point of view, everything can be measured and we can directly attribute a particular framework around that. So if we look at an atom, we define what the atom is, and then we say what the atom can and can't do. So we've put it into a box, we've identified it, and we think we know how this atom will behave. We do that with people too. We put them into a box, define what they are. Oh, that's what they are. So they need this kind of role. Reductionist, putting people into boxes and then sticking a label on their head and saying, well, they go into that file. But the problem with that is we forget about a concept that quantum physics has proven, which is called emergence. That the universe has emergent properties. Emergent properties means that something that you thought of as an atom was specifically identified with these features and values and behaviors was now behaving differently. There was emergent properties within the atom or in the universe. So because we can't measure and identify everything with the structure, we think we can, and then we miss out. And then quantum physics is proving over and over again the observer effect, the double slit experiment, what Einstein calls spooky science at a distance, things behaving in an incoherent way, which is opposed to the Newtonian model of looking at the situation from a limited point of view. And of course, Newton's laws of thermodynamics were very valuable. Now, if we take that into the corporate culture and identifying people, we cannot put the organization and people into a framework and then diagnose that framework with processes and patterns, because we forget about emergent properties. We forget how the environment starts affecting the individual. And what we find out about the environment from epigenetics is that the cell in the environment is being affected by how the environment is. Because if you take a cell, what's the difference between the cell in the kidney and the liver? It is the environment around it which is navigating and dictating how the cell behaves. So if we look at the environment in the corporate culture, that's where we need to start. We need to look at the environment. We need to look at what we're creating here. And we found how epigenetics, by changing our mindset, by changing our thought patterns, by changing our behaviors, starts affecting the body. And people have been cured from all sorts of illnesses and living in a more authentic way, even changing gene expression. A gene that was going to give you cancer or heart disease, by you changing the environment and the dialogue and your food and other variables around it, those triggers and that gene expression no longer happens. So if we realize that we look at the corporate culture from its environmental perspective and looking at everything rather than the reductionist view and putting people and processes into boxes and applying the Newtonian model to corporate culture and how we maintain a healthy environment within the culture, we have to go beyond the reductionist view to a more holistic view, where we're looking at the environment and everything within it, the interrelationship between one person and the other, between the managers, between the leaders, between processes and systems, and see how they play in together, which is this interconnectedness of how everything relates to everything else. And we know about the butterfly effect, which talks about somewhere a butterfly flapping its wings in the Amazon would create a wind pattern that may even cause a cyclone somewhere as far as Florida. Now, most people don't see that interrelationship because we have a very polarized, focused vision and we don't see the broad perspective. So my whole focus has been to create leadership that is based on wisdom. And wisdom is practical understanding. It's looking at how things were, how things are right now, and what we're missing in the current times. And that would then create the future that we want to live, a future in our work environment that is harmonious, that is working together with a holistic point of view instead of a reductionist point of view. And so wisdom is the recognition of patterns. We have to recognize patterns. The funny thing about history is that we don't even look at history. We think that life started in our corporate culture when this company was born. We don't even look beyond the surface as to how our economies and how our environment and how all these other factors are affecting how people in the workplace behave and how they thrive and how they are more productive and all the rest of it. And that is so important to understand how leaders need to take a step back and look at the patterns that created the situation we're in right now. And instead of trying to identify the problem and fix the problem, you're going to create more problems by this system, because you solve one problem and you don't look at how one thing has a consequence on another thing. So we can say we're going to increase spending on reward programs for employees, and in that process, employees will become happy. So what someone comes in, identify and do a survey and say, 9 out of 10 respondents at the company said, we're not happy. And then we ask the question, would you be happy with a wellness program? And they implement a wellness program. But yet they've created all sorts of other things that we haven't even identified. The wellness is there, but have we looked at the mental well-being? Have we looked at the spiritual well-being? Have we looked at the physical well-being? Have we looked at the entire human being in the environment? And then have we looked at the communication and the interrelationships between teams? Have we looked at how team dynamics are affected by leadership dynamics? We find 93% of HR leaders having burnout. So many HR professionals are suffering in their workplace. They're exhausted, they're run down. Now, why is that? It's because we've put all the load on HR, expecting HR to implement solutions to wellness and incentives and all sorts of programs, but there's no buy-in from leadership. So we make it into an HR problem, but it's not. It's a leadership problem. It's the entire issue. And like I said, it's not just a leadership problem, because the leader is only as good as the people that follow him or her. Now, how do the people come in the picture? What is their motivation? What's driving them? All these questions need to be examined and understood. Otherwise, we're looking at things from a very limited framework. And because we have an over-reliance on rational thinking and scientific deduction, which is very useful in one aspect, but in the corporate environment and when we're dealing with people, and people are beyond processes, we have to encompass and create a view that is very much a bird's eye view, where we're looking at all the moving parts and looking at the interconnectedness and looking this from a holistic point of view, which is what Ayurveda, traditional Chinese medicine, and all ancient ways of looking at the world, even the Taoist teaching, how one system affects another system. And this requires wisdom, and it requires leaders to go through a process of tapping into other faculties and facilities that makes them essentially human. Things like their heart. People don't want to talk about the heart anymore because that's reserved for love songs. But in fact, we know now that there's more communication happening from the heart to the brain than from the brain to the heart. And Aristotle and all the ancients knew about this, including what Western philosophy is based upon. The importance of the heart in perception, in understanding, in conceptualizing, not just the brain, but bringing the heart into the way, bringing intuition, the ability to sense and perceive. These things are not even spoken about in corporate culture, yet leaders need to inculcate that. They need to take a deeper understanding, looking at life in a holistic way, looking at themselves in a holistic way, in order to understand the situation that they're facing as well. So understanding these principles that we can gain from tapping into other avenues of perception now allows us to shift perspective. So all you need to do is change your lens. to look at the situation and take a step outside. Now you're seeing all the moving parts, and now you can, instead of acting irrationally and saying, well, there's the problem, there's the solution, implement the 7-point plan according to this leading financial consulting institution, we say, hold on a second here. If I do that, won't it affect that? And asking those questions, we realize how we know we have a very good sense of meaning and purpose, navigating the workplace and corporate culture from a holistic point of view, which now inculcates a new sense of meaning and purpose into our people as well. We can't be, as leaders, trying to convince people to adopt a new way of looking at the world and thinking if we're not living that way ourselves. So a lot of people say, we don't want to hear this stuff. We just want to continue life as usual. But here's the thing. Life is not happening in the corporate world as usual. And the workplaces are toxic. People are collapsing. People are resigning. People are all going to start up their own companies. But we're losing the most important and valuable people in the process. So I don't think we have the luxury of sitting back and saying, yeah, we're not ready to address that problem. Let's continue. Let's continue life as usual. Life is not as usual. And it's time leaders step up and look at life and the importance of leading with wisdom.